computer.
I like it. All right, let's just jump. What episode are we on, boys? What episode is this?
I think it might be 20, but give me a sec.
For this season, is it episode 3, but?
Oh, don't worry about it. I'm not doing. It's episode 20.
This is our 20th episode.
Yep.
That's a little milestone right there.
Yeah.
Episode 20 of the Racing Line podcast, boys. We've made it to 20. Let's see if we can now make it to 50, but still
Michael
a pre-season. No, Michael hasn't. Definitely not. He needed to have a shower and needed to have some dinner, so we've relieved him of his duties tonight. So, men, another pre-season special. How is our week before we crack into it?
It's been good, man.
All right, yours?
Yeah, not bad. Can't complain.
That's
A few
good.
little things to talk about. So, for those of you that might be listening, as I just alluded to before, we're still in the pre-season. Things are starting to heat up ever so slightly this week. We had a few Formula One livery reveals that we're going to talk about over the coming pod. We've got a little bit of Formula One, of MotoGP testing that's taken place firstly in Malaysia and then in Indonesia that we can have a little bit of a discussion about. And we've sponsored our first event as a podcast at the grassroots level in karting, and we'll have a little bit of a story time about that as well. So there's a few things to talk about tonight, even though it's a pre-season. And let's just jump straight into it, boys. Formula One is back, at least aesthetically, for 2022. We've had 4 reveals: Haas, Red Bull, Aston Martin, and McLaren. Some underwhelming, some right on par, and some definitely overwhelming. What are your takeaways from the 2022 car reveals up to this point? Should we start with Haas?
Yeah, I don't I think that the liveries themselves, whatever you think about them, I think that the actual like the shape of each car, like the style, the change in direction that the group has gone for is definitely a big plus. I think they all look aggressive and sleek and clean all at the same time.
Like the shape of the car?
Yeah, just like the overall shape that we're getting out of like these new cars, I think is a big win for the sport. I mean, I hope like then you want it to be able to do what they want them to do in terms of the ground effect underneath and then being able to follow. But in terms of just the look, I think they look like pretty good. I'm really happy about the change in look.
What are you, H? What was your initial foot?
Yeah, look, I like the look. As I said to you guys before the pod, I'm not a fan of the wing being so high off the ground. It just looks odd to me. The whole car is planted and you come to the front, and I understand that it's there for aerodynamic reasons, but it just, I don't know, it doesn't look right to me. But I think it's hard to tell at this point because I don't think, we've got one real car in the Aston, but I don't think the other 3 teams that have released so far have actually released their final car. I think there's a lot more to come from those 3 constructors.
It's interesting, right? And I said this on one of our other chats during the week. So just jumping back to Haas a little bit, right?
Yeah.
What I don't understand, and maybe it's just, I don't know, the fact that we're design teachers or we think about that kind of stuff, right? But Haas have been underwhelming really for the last couple of years. But just because you're underwhelming, practically and functionally doesn't mean you have to be underwhelming aesthetically. But I always find that you've got these really ordinary cars or ordinary teams, and they have really ordinary designs for their cars. And I think Haas is an example of that. There is really nothing about the car that excites me. It's a very
flag.
It is, but it's just a very boring design. And I'm like, come on, man. Like, I know that branding is huge in Formula One. I get that, but that doesn't mean that you can't design something that looks good, even if it's not particularly fast. And we don't even know if it's fast yet. So that was my initial thought with the Haas car. I'm like, a little bit underwhelming. To touch on what Joseph said as well, I think if we're going to talk about congratulating the F1 teams for designing good cars, I think the real vision has to go to the F1 strategy team, particularly Ross Brawn. I mean, they spent a lot of time working on, developing the formula that all these teams had to meet. And it was a very different formula. A lot of work went into developing a formula that would actually bring about good racing on the TV. And I think it's probably fairly realistic to say that the effort that went into this formula in particular had a lot more to do with TV optics than probably any time in F1's history, which is not necessarily a bad thing. So if we're going to talk about giving credit to anyone, I think a lot of it has to go to the strategy group. And then lastly, on what you said, H, I kind of am a little bit with you, man, with the front wing. It is sitting a little bit high off the ground. And I don't know if that's just because they can't have like the drop down tabs before they put the front wing anymore or whatever it might be, but it will take a little bit of time to get used to. But in saying that, it's probably not as dramatic a shift as something like the Halo, and we got used to that pretty quickly too. So I don't know. Definitely a new time in Formula One. What about Red Bull? Didn't really show us anything.
Well, I love the livery. Like that livery is going to be iconic. If we look back in 10, 15 years time, we're going to look at that the same way we look at the Marlboro McLaren. Like, I think it's just going to be one of those things that it's going to be iconic.
The only thing livery in general.
Yeah, like even in Seb's era, they had the lighter blue, which I really liked. But then since 2015 or whatever it was, they've moved to this dark blue, the matte finish. I absolutely love it. I think it's awesome.
And it really does let the yellow and red of the Red Bull stand out a lot. But the interesting thing for me is going to be when we do actually see the car in action, because I mean you can't really see a whole lot. There's a lot of shadow. It's just a dummy car. Yeah, it's just a dummy car.
I think that's the one that Formula One have been using, mate. I think they just purchased the chassis of Formula One, to be honest.
Oh, did they?
That's what I've read. Yeah, they've a lot of the teams have just kind of used the base chassis that Formula One for the unveiling of the car.
I didn't know that they just bought it off Formula One, but that does make a bit of sense.
Because it looks exactly the same.
Well, it is a nice car. It doesn't give us anything to run off of. But when we talk about someone like Aston Martin, who has released their car, they've released videos of the testing of their car as well. I think it's a really nice car, to be frank. I think I like the color of it. I like how they've incorporated the green, but also the yellow, so it becomes a little bit more
traditional.
Yeah, but a little bit more in line with all of the other cars as well, or the other racing as well that's within their current racing stable.
I think
that's
they lost
only racing.
They lost BWT to Alpine. I think that's why the pink's gone.
Yeah. It's probably done them a favor, to be honest with you. The only thing that's really, I don't know if it's unsettling me or that it's going to take a little bit of time for me to get used to is the wheel covers. I really think. I mean, I was hoping that with the 18-inch rims, and particularly with the concept art that was coming out from it last year and the larger, spokes on the rims, that there would be quite a, like a sleek design to that. But just with the wheel covers, I feel like it makes it almost a little bit too toyish. That's probably just a little bit of getting used to as well.
I think they'll develop that pretty quickly. I don't think it'll stay like that, to be honest.
Problem is, it's too aerodynamic for them not to do it. It's too aerodynamic for them to have something like that, as opposed to going back to the rims. So I don't know.
Who knows? Might only have it for a year, and then F1 will ban it because of the look of it. But
what did you guys think of the Aston, the vents on the top?
I didn't really notice them, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Like the three vents, like the.
No, if you look at the top view of the Aston, there's about 6 vents on either side of the driver. Apparently, they're there to help cool the radiator and cool the engine. So they've sort of made a workaround for having a ground effect car, so the air's going underneath, but they've kind of.
Oh, I see it now, and I can see it on the top of the side pods.
Yeah,
That's very interesting.
yeah. So and that's why that's the only car that we know that we've gotten a legit one. Because of that,
Yeah.
design aspect. McLaren's brought out theirs with the pull rod, push rod suspension.
Mm.
Did,
The interesting thing about the McLaren, I was actually looking at it in a little bit more detail today, and there's a little bit of, obviously you can see some of the design, which is good, but there's also, like, when you're looking from the front view and you're looking underneath the car, all of that has been made like very blurry and very simplified. And then even the at the bottom of the car where they've got the Venturi, or the entry points to the Venturi chamber underneath the car, that has been de-res. That, like, section of the photo has been de-resed quite a lot just to hide some information there. So they've kind of presented, the shape of the car, but I think all the performance aspects of the car, they haven't really like shown a whole lot, because it's still very de-resed in some respects. But it's a striking livery, I'll say that. It's a very you can't miss it with the day glow orange and the blue that they've used. Quite nice.
One thing you just said that I haven't thought about at all is that it's going to be very hard for teams to copy each other's ideas on the underside of the car, like they put on top of the car, because you can't actually see it. Whereas before you could, just take a peek and look at some footage, and you could see that you could literally replicate a Mercedes in some teams.
What they need to do as a team is sacrifice the car that they want to see underneath, go to Monza to the first corner, and then just pinch into that first corner so that you can get the car beside you raised, and then you can see underneath it.
Yeah. And what you said about the McLaren, I'm not a massive fan of this McLaren livery. I've liked all of them with the since I've gone to the orange until this one. I think I said it in the chat. I said I think it looks like one of the generic online liveries from the F1 game. Like I think there's too much going on, to be honest. I mean, it might grow on me, that's for sure. But as of now, I was telling my brother I'd give it maybe a 6 out of 10. And I know you guys both disagree with that.
Do you know what the issue with when McLaren release liveries in general, and why they don't look so good when they release, though, is because they always release on a white background their concept or their release pictures, but everyone else always releases like with studio backgrounds and stuff like that. So it always just stands out. But then once you see it in the flesh, I find particularly I feel like historically I'm always a little bit underwhelmed by by the livery of the McLaren. And then once I see it in real life, I'm like, actually, that looks a lot better. And it's pretty similar to what happened with the Williams, I thought, last year, which looked horrible in its release photos, but then ended up being quite nice.
It looked horrible all year, mate. Don't
worry.
Yeah,
I didn't rate that at all.
I didn't mind it, to be honest with you, by the end of the year, if I'm being frank. No, you weren't a fan at all?
No, I got used to it, but I was never a fan of it.
I think I've got it on F1 2021 as a livery you can pick, mate. So
what have we got coming up now with the liveries? We've still got, I think Alfa Romeo is coming out.
Alpha Tauri's tonight.
Yep.
Or tomorrow morning.
Is Williams tonight or tomorrow morning as well?
I'll let you know in 2 seconds. So, sorry guys. All right. So we have Alpha Tauri. Williams is tomorrow, so the 15th.
Yeah.
Ferrari's on the 17th. 18th is Mercedes, and then underwhelmingly we finish off with Alpine on the 21st and Alpha on the 27th.
How much hotter would these bloody cars look with 18-inch spokes?
Yeah, what are you doing, bro? Now you're gonna stuff up our YouTube stream.
No, I won't, because you'll still just have the what's it called. This is just a share screen.
You
don't
sure?
have to use this. Yeah, that's fine. It looks so much better with the spoked rims.
Yeah, but that livery just looks awesome too. I think that helps as well.
No,
it does. Also, the way that they've put that rear. I don't know.
It'll be interesting to see the first test in Bahrain. That's what I'm waiting for. We can debate these. That's disgusting. We can debate these designs all day long, but at the end of
Doesn't
the
mean
day,
nothing, eh?
even James Key at McLaren said, they've taken a big punt on the suspension setup on the McLaren.
Mm.
He said, I was watching the whole launch the other day, and he said we've either designed something that's going to take us to the top, or it's going to be absolutely horrible. So,
Really?
yeah, like they don't know. And he said he's been working in Formula One for 25 years, and this is the biggest rule change that he's ever
It's
come
huge.
across. So,
Undertaken.
yeah,
Revolutionary.
usually it's just slight progression. Even the start of the turbo hybrid wasn't this big. So it's
true.
a whole new aerodynamic concept. I'm
Well,
excited though.
I can't wait. I think that it's, again, like we're talking about liveries, and it doesn't really mean a whole lot at the end of the day. What's going to start meaning things is when we see the timing sheets, hopefully in a month or so. But at least it does give us something to talk about. It does start building a little bit of anticipation for it. But another thing that we can start generating some anticipation towards is MotoGP. So unlike F1 testing that's going to be behind closed doors to begin with, MotoGP has been, I was watching it on Foxtel today. You could watch the test on Foxtel, and it was like it was a race weekend kind of broadcast, which was really cool to see. 2 tests so far. They've tested in Sepang, they've tested in Indonesia. Both tests have been somewhat affected by the weather, but I'll start with you, Joey. You've had a chance to have a look at some of the times and some of the trends, and what are your initial thoughts on where the 2022 season is stacking up?
Well, I'm piggybacking off the experts when I say what I'm going to say.
That's all right.
So pretty much they tested at Sepang for the first couple of days, and they also had the shakedowns a couple of days before that as well. And what they saw pretty much from Sepang was that the 2021 Ducati set the fastest time, which is no surprise. That bike was by far the best bike at the end of last year, and it came into the test at the hands of now I'm having a mind blank. Bastianini, and he set the fastest lap ever at Sepang on it, and even the other fella on the old bike, the new guy at the VR46. No, VR46.
Luca Marini.
No, Bezecchi. Bezecchi also was in the top 5 on last year's 2021 Desma Zadici. So what we can see is that at the moment, that none of the new bikes are at the level that last year's Ducati was at in terms of pace around Sepang. But also, we do know. Keep going.
I was looking at the 5th, like the last day of running, which was a dry day. Obviously, Bastianini was at the top. 0.02 of a second behind him was Espargaro on the Aprilia, which was pretty impressive. And then in the top 5 as well, there was Maverick Vinales at 10th off. So there were 2 Aprilias at the top. There was Martin on the 2022 Desmo and Alex Rins on the new Suzuki. So that's a pretty interesting top 5. Bagnaia was in the top 6, Quartararo 7th, and then Marquez in 8th. So
what we know is that the 2 Aprilia riders were able to run the shakedown test as well for their bike, because that's their they've got that leeway because they haven't won a race yet. So you would expect them to be a little bit more up to pace with their new bike, and apparently their bike is quite drastically different from last year, which is going to be very interesting for the rest of the competition if they're already showing that much pace. And then also we saw, what like you said, Jorge Martin towards the top on the new Ducati, but they were having a lot of, especially the factory bikes, were having a lot of setup problems. Like there's I think Jack Miller went out twice and had engine and electrical gremlins stop him on 2 different runs. And
he wasn't happy, was he, this week, Jack Miller?
Oh, not on the first weekend. The first, I think, day or 2 days at Sepang, and even I'm having mind blanks of all the names now. His teammate also had the same similar problems, and Zarco also had similar problems. So there was a few gremlins that Ducati in general was working out. But I suppose when you've got 5 bikes going around, you're gonna fix up these gremlins a lot quicker than if you've got 2. So like that's probably one of the biggest positives of the amount of bikes that they've got circulating. And then Honda also had a really good showing. They had Honda had 2 of the top, 3 riders who did the most laps in the test at Sepang. So you can see that they were just getting as much mileage as they could on that new bike, which is, as many people have said, including Marc Marquez, probably the biggest change in philosophy in the last 10 years for Honda, making it more rideable for their whole stable, not just Marc Marquez. And
I was listening. Sorry, I was reading some of his comments about the test today, and the comments were something like, to obviously grab the headlines, I was saying something like Marquez doesn't feel like the special place with his bike yet. But then what he was also saying about the bike was it was good that every time they were making changes to the bike, it doesn't matter what it was, it doesn't matter if it was on the hard tire or the soft tire, all the changes that they were making, the lap time was improving, even if they weren't particularly sure if that change was going to make a difference. So we're saying that the rideability of the bike and just the general, workability, ergonomics, whatever you want to call it, is allowing them to feel comfortable with the pace of the bike, even if they're not, riding it at that, 110% to maximize the lap. So in that regard, even though he himself hasn't said that he's kind of at the point where he's won with his bike, they're very happy with, how easy it is to get the bike into a window to actually improve its lap time, which I thought was good, particularly considering it's a completely different concept to what they've had. And, you always would back Honda to, do their due diligence so that the bike that they do bring out is going to be effective. But I guess you never know, particularly when you're trying to make such a quantum leap to catch up to teams like Ducati and Yamaha that were really so much more competitive than them last year.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because the Yamaha riders are underwhelmed, I'd use the word, with the advancements on that new bike. And even I think they said to Quadraro, they said, has the bike made a step forward? And he said, and he gave him a wink and said, I think maybe you could say half a step. And when you look at him coming into a contract year where he's off contract at the end of the year, they're not the comments you really want to be hearing from your number one rider. And yes, that was the bike that won the championship last year. But as we saw towards the end of last year, that bike does have its limits, and you do not want to be going up against a Honda, a Ducati, and by all accounts, the new Suzuki, which has also made really good steps forward in the way that Johan Mir wants the bike to sort of head. They've got it some better top speed, a bit of better acceleration, and we've also seen a really interesting new front fairing with like a new downforce setup that looks like it's been lightly modeled off a Ducati. But yeah, so we're seeing all these teams taking steps forward, but Yamaha seemed to sort of just be sitting where they were at the end of last year, and it was really probably disheartening seeing 3 of their 4 bikes in the bottom from like 17th and down in the testing at Sepang, and they've been a lot. They seem to have been closer up the timesheets at Mandalika, but
so I was having an interesting thought about Yamaha this week, right? So they let Vinales go, pretty easily, because it it was pretty obvious that they were putting all their effort into Quartararo and, having him as their number one rider, and they're able to make that decision. That's, right. They have the ability to do that, but they've got a bike that is not as competitive as they thought, by all accounts, as early on. There's whispers that Quartararo is in talks with Ducati, and is considering a move away from the Yamaha team. Where does that leave Yamaha? And we've spoken about this last year as well, that Yamaha is probably, for as good a team they are, they're struggling a little bit with young rider talent right now. Where does that potentially leave Yamaha? And with the Aprilia looking as good as it is, early on, if we just look at the Indonesia as well, where were they? Aprilia were third in Indonesia with Aleix Espargaro, and then Vinales was seventh. And he was in seventh. He was 4/10 off Pol Espargaro in the Honda. So the Aprilia is looking quite good at this stage. So he might have got the better end of the stick, to be honest with you. And Yamaha could find themselves in a little bit of a pickle if they can't convince their world champion to stay on board for the next couple of years.
Well, it's going to be interesting with Quartararo, because he's talking to Ducati, but it doesn't really look like there's much room to move in Ducati, to be honest. Jack Miller's he's gonna have a really good year to keep his spot, I'd say. But there's so many, would you put Quartararo on the bike if Bastianini has another amazing season like he ended last year? I'd probably say not. Or if Jorge Martin has a better season than last year, I'd probably say not as well.
As a team, I don't know much about MotoGP, but would you have Quartararo and Bagnaia on the same bike? Is that two big dogs together?
Riders, I'd say. You probably just want the two best riders these days.
You know what's interesting? I think you just brought up Jack Miller. I think his early season, so I think the first six races could be very telling for Jack, because let's say the Yamaha isn't performing as well as it should be. Marc Marquez will be back. The rest of the field looks to be more competitive. Let's say that the Yamaha is mired in that bottom part of the top five, between 5 and 10, and they're not as competitive as they would have expected. And Jack Miller's having an ordinary time, and the Ducati factory team are kind of losing a bit of patience with him. I think it's very reasonable for them to say, Quartararo, come join us. Here's your box of cash or whatever you want, and to find somewhere else for Miller, or to say, find another seat.
Well, interesting you say that. I suppose if Quartararo's season is, or if he keeps this sort of attitude up and he decides that he wants to leave, I wouldn't be surprised if a rider of Jack Miller's quality went onto the market. Yamaha would have no option but to snap him up, because they've got no one lined up in their junior ranks at all. And you'd say they have got no one on their satellite bikes either who's shown enough potential at the moment to take that step up. So they might just need someone like that to get on the bike anyway. These speculation games are hard to play when we haven't seen one lap in anger yet, and Jack hasn't been that bad in practice at all, to be honest. It's weird. You can't really tell much at the moment because some people are doing flyers. Jack didn't even get one heater lap in Sepang. His 2 heater laps were both marred with electrical gremlins. So it's hard to read into that. And now they're at a new track that, by all accounts, is filthy because it hasn't been used since the last Superbike race last year. So, what I was mainly looking for from testing was rider comments about how they feel about the bike, numbers of laps done, and then also I just wanted to get a feeling of what the teams were actually there trying to achieve. So like we saw another team, KTM, went to Sepang and were literally just throwing totally different parts onto their 2 factory bikes. And then we saw Fernandez and Gardner just putting in the time to get used to riding a MotoGP bike, and Gardner is still struggling with those broken wrists And even yesterday, Fernandez got taken to hospital after a big crash for him as well. So they both look like they might be carrying a bit of battle damage when we get to the first round. But I suppose better now than in during the season.
Yeah.
And then I think, did I touch on Suzuki?
A little bit, not really, but I think
So
I'll just quickly tell you where they finished up on both days. So at the end of Sepang, Alex Rins finished fourth on the new GSX-RR, just at 0.13 tenths off the pace. And then me finished in 12th, almost 4/10 off the pace. And then in the most recent test that in Indonesia, where were the two Suzukis? Rins in 6th, 4/10 off the pace. And then me didn't set a time. So there you go.
So what they were saying from Sepang, or when Mir rocked up at Sepang, he was asked by a few journalists about how he thought the season would go, or did he have any thoughts on the new bike? And he said pretty sort of half-heartedly, we'll see how it feels, and if they've addressed the problems that we had outlined at the end of last year. And pretty much by the end of that test, he was really happy with just the places where the bike had improved. And one thing we know about Suzuki is that they don't bring updates as rapidly as other teams, but they do, when they do bring something, it usually works pretty well.
They've got a very good testing system.
Yeah, so and they also had the other two guys there doing the shakedown as well, and they had similar things to say that they're test riders. But like to hear the confidence, and the thing is that Suzuki, we know, wasn't miles off the pace last year. Like we know that it just had a deficit on acceleration and in qualifying, and the two things that they've really worked on and made advances in is the feeling in the front end and the top speed and acceleration. So if they have actually improved that, then we would definitely be in for a much better season from Suzuki, which is awesome for the sport.
The thing that is going to surprise that I really want to see this year, and I hope it's going to happen, but I don't know how much faith I have in it happening, is I want to see Alex Rins put a full season together on that Ducati. I mean, I don't know if I'm crazy, but I think he is definitely he's definitely the faster of the two riders between him and me. I don't know if he's got the same tire conservation that Mir has, but he's definitely the faster rider. He just can't stay on the bike. So if he has like the pace to stay with the front riders, and he does, provided he stays upright, is he able to put a full season together so we can see what that package has with the more tenacious rider, as opposed to me, who's a little bit more calculated and methodical and seems to just not make mistakes?
Well, the question is his pace because he's taking more risk, like because he has more pace. But if it's because he's taking more risk, that is most probably why he's also binning the bike more. So it's for him, and this is a big year for Rins as well, because I think he's off contract in this year, but he needs to put a good season, because you can see if he puts a good season together, Suzuki will be probably pretty happy to keep him, because his outright pace has always been really good. So for him, it's sort of strapping on the big boy pants and going, all right, well, this is how, as a team, like, we need to go forward. I need to finish some races, because even though Suzuki's won the teams championship, the riders championship, they didn't win the teams championship that year, mainly because he couldn't stay on the bike. So if he has more front end feeling, which is what they're saying, and he's already shown in testing that he's probably one of the faster guys in the grid, like it could be a massive year for Rins. Because I don't think anyone denies that realistically in outright pace, I think he outqualifies Mir more than the other way around.
Yeah, I agree. I just think it's a matter of him putting a full season together. Let's move on. So this week was a pretty exciting week for the podcast as well. We pulled together a little bit of money to sponsor a karting event. So this week there was the City of Sydney titles that took place at Eastern Creek, 2-day karting event where the organisers were able to put together the private Eastern Creek karting track and the public hire kart track into one 2-kilometre circuit. That was, really interesting. And we were, as a podcast, able to get involved and get on board and sponsor the senior performance category for the weekend. So just a cash prize for first, second and third. And we got a little bit of exposure from it as well, which is always good. But what an event it was. Obviously I was there, Joe, you were there. You probably got to enjoy it a little bit more than I did just because you didn't have this, I don't know, feel like as a racer, you kind of go do your race, go back to the kart, think about changes to make, and you don't actually get to watch as much of the event as a spectator would. But what did you make of the spectacle?
Well, I always forget in between events how good the vibes are at those events, and it's probably a word that is thrown around too much, but just the overall friendly nature of most competitors at the event, and you do realize that like most karts, it is a bit of a team effort getting them on the grid. Like there is quite a few people in the shadows, prepping and such. But the general, feel is it's like everyone's just happy to be there, and it really was. It was great. It was. I don't know how many karts there were. Do you have a wild guess?
210.
Okay, yeah. So 210 karts. So imagine 210 tents of people just running around trying to get stuff done. And I was
probably
only
about 500 spectators, I reckon, as well on the Sunday.
Yes, spectators. Easily. There's then you could probably imagine another 210 crew, as well as the drivers there working on karts at least. But yeah, it was honestly a fantastic day. And on Sunday it was great because it looked menacing that we were going to get some rain at a few times of the day, but it held off.
I think we got enough of it on Saturday, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I was happy I wasn't there on the Saturday, to be honest. And yeah, it was a really good day. We had a few little
hiccups,
dramas during the day to keep us on our toes, especially from coming from 2 hours of sleep. I was probably hoping for it to be a little bit quieter, and I'll let you talk about how your day panned out. But yeah, like I thought, all in all, I had a blast. Honestly, I had a blast.
It was a pretty eventful weekend, and probably you touched on it before, but it's very true that for one person to get a card out and race, it's definitely not, or it can be a one-man effort, but I don't think it's realistically plausible to do it well. You always need someone or at least a team with you to assist, because you get there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and by the time you leave at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you kind of haven't really had much time to even think. So you and Luke being there one day each was very, very useful. So I'll say thanks for that. But how did the week pan out? So Saturday, I was looking at the weather forecast for the whole week, and I was kind of seeing if the weather would change so that it wasn't going to have a bit of a downpour on Saturday. And I didn't commit to buying wets really at all week. I'm like, nah, it's not going to happen. I'll be lucky. I'll get away with it. Then on Friday night, about 9 o'clock, it looked like, fate was going to have other stories. So I thought, I'm not going to race for 2 days and not have a set of wets and ruin my weekend. So I bought a set of wets at 9 o'clock at night on the Friday, and they were ready for me on race day, which was good. And then it was, just lightly sprinkling about 6 o'clock in the morning, but by race time, or by track time at least, we had 2 practice sessions on Saturday morning. The track was pretty much bone dry, and that was, really cool. So we're able to watch a few guys go out. My first practice session, the kart didn't feel great. There was a bit of a jetting issue. So coming out of all the long sweeping corners, it was kind of bogging down and just like stalling out before it hit full speed. So it was pretty much a wasted session there. About 6 seconds off the pace, and just from, acceleration issues. And then practice 2 came around as well. The kart, slightly adjusted the jetting. It felt a little bit better, but there were still pretty similar issues there as well. And then also at the end of second practice, I came off. I just was pushing too hard and put it in the weeds on the higher track that had literally no grip. So it was pretty slippery. There's a lot of like resin on the higher track, just from, when there's potholes, they just like fill it with it's definitely not a very sticky surface. So it was very difficult with the application of the throttle at some parts of that track. And then we went into qualifying in the blazing sunlight. So it was probably would have been about 26, 27 degrees when we were out on the setup grid waiting to go out. And then by the time we came around to do our second lap of qualifying, literally the clouds had just rolled over. It was black and it was pissing down rain. So I think everyone was just trying to get through the 5-minute session without coming off, and there were karts all over the place. And I finished 31st out of 34th, which is not a great place to be. I felt stitched up because when I came in, the timing had said that I finished 11th out of 34. So I was peaking, and I sent a message to the boys saying, how great am I in the rain on slicks, and was, G'ing myself up. And then I got to the grid and they said, nah, mate, you're 31st, not 11th. So that wasn't great. And then on the Saturday, we had one race as well. So we had the first heat race on Saturday. And the same thing happened. So it was sunny literally from our qualifying session through all 8 classes up to our race. And then in the distance, it was getting really grey, but it was still probably a kilometre away, and we thought we might get away with it. And then by the time we had got onto the in-grid, I just felt one raindrop, land on my arm, because I already had my helmet on at that stage. And sorry, my hand, because my gloves weren't on. And I looked up at the sky, I said to Luke, I said, listen, we got to change to wets because it's going to come down. And then literally as we were changing to wets on the grid, it just started bucketing. And then obviously everyone changed to wets as well. And then the race was interesting. It was just the survival of the fittest, staying on without spinning, and cuts were going off all over the places. I made about 3 moves going into the first corner and made a bit of position there. But after all was said and done, somehow I came out of that race in 12th. So 31st to 12th, a plus 19 position advantage. So that was pretty epic. Some great racing, and that was the Saturday, pretty interesting. So yeah, and then the Sunday race 1, we started from 24th. So they gave us an aggregate, the second race we started from 31st again and moved up from about 31st, I think, to 26th or 25th in a lap and a half. So 6 positions, pretty good. And then going into a hairpin, just got cleaned out literally from the inside. The guy obviously, I don't know if he missed his braking mark or if his brakes failed or whatever it was, but I just remember turning into the corner, and the next thing, my whole body was, pushed to the side of my cart, and I had someone else's cart on top of me. And then it kept moving, obviously, and rolled and hit another cart there. So pretty dangerous, happened pretty quickly. Broke my seat because of all the weight that was transferred onto me and kind of ruined that race. So we didn't get any positions from that one because we were DNF. And then started the pre-final, which is the race before the final, from 26th.
No, 21st. Then you lost positions on the outlap.
Yes, that's right. Started from 21st. And we actually, we did. We were pretty happy with that, weren't we?
How do you lose positions on an outlap?
Because from finished 12th and then a DNFs, and somehow we were 21st out of 34th for the pre-final. I was pretty happy with that because I kind of thought if I'm 21st, I can move into teens. And my goal from like before the races was to try to get to 15th. That was my goal, because it's obviously couldn't get to the people in front. Like they're all people that are racing every other weekend, and they're quick. So that wasn't really a realistic point. But I thought if I could be in the midfield for how unregularly I race, I thought I'd be pretty happy with that. So 21st was really good. And then they gave the order to start the karts, and all the karts took off, and mine spluttered and turned off. Started her up again. Same thing happened. Then I finally got her going, and then she stopped on the outlap. And yeah, I thought the race was over. Managed to get her going and came back to 28th for the start. So I was dropped from 21st to 28th, and took the line at 28th for the start of the race. And then we were able to go from 28th during the race to 24th. And that was a dry 5-lapper. And that was pretty good. Like I was pretty happy with that. I didn't expect to make massive inroads in the dry, just because everyone's a lot more competitive and there's a lot less, mistakes and line issues and things like that. And then we
found out why that happened as well. Like we called your engine mechanic on over during the after the race, and we told him what happened. And it was because
I left the rain cover on because I just wasn't sure if it was going to keep raining during the weekend. So I thought I'd leave that on in case it rains when we're racing. I'm not going to get all this water in my airbox. But it was affecting the amount of oxygen that I was sucking into the engine. So at low, in the idle state, it just wasn't sucking enough in. So for the final, I just took it off. I said, let's just run the risk and try to get as much top speed as we could. And then we went from 24th in the final, about 5 laps in, we're at 19th, something like that. So made a few spots, and kart felt really good. I actually felt really good too with how I was racing and, getting the most out of myself really. But then in the second half of the race, it was just agony. Just the pain on the ribs from, being thrown around in the kart through a lot of really technical corners. It was quite excruciating, really. Like I was kind of screaming in my helmet just to psych myself up through some of it. But then once you start losing control of your body and you want to turn in, and you have to turn in with your kart, and you just don't have the energy, and you're just pushing away, the kart just starts tailing, and you lose a lot of time. So went from 19th to 22nd and finished there for the weekend. But all in all, it was a great weekend of racing, and just the whole atmosphere of the event. It was great to see so many karts. We had a class of 34. There was another class that was full to the brim with 34 as well. Like seeing stuff like that just shows why it's the greatest sport, really. So yeah, that was the weekend. Bit long-winded.
Sounds good, mate.
Some great fun. Some great fun.
We're going to try and put together a vlog with some footage that we recorded, and Anthony taking us through each race and showing you a bit of the repairs that what we
could actually good. Like I didn't think about it, but then when you started just filming stuff and that, at first I was a bit self-conscious that people would think like we're a bunch of larrikins, but then I thought, this actually probably could do a half decent video of this. So that will probably come out on the pod socials in hopefully the next week or so. But knowing how slow it takes Joseph to churn out even a pod video where all the templates are set up for him and there's no editing required.
There's editing required. There's always editing required. Come on.
Not as much as making a feature film, Joe.
Hey mate, just stop the social.
All in all, it was great. All in all, it was great. It was really good, and hopefully, as a pod, we get to see some of the benefit of that advertising over the next couple of weeks. So there's a bit of a strategy there. We'll see how it plays out. Otherwise, it'll be a somewhat expensive bit of promotion. But at this stage, I guess any exposure is good exposure, right?
That's
it can't be bad. It can't be bad. So yeah, where does that leave us, Ben?
Lando.
Lando's got a new contract. I think it's well deserved. He's probably a little bit like Alex Rins, though, in my mind. Probably has to put a whole season together. What do you think about that, H?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think McLaren may have jumped the gun a little bit. He had 2 years left on his contract. I think they signed him up to ward off other teams who he may have been talking to. But I think they've got the most balanced driver pairing on the grid. Maybe you could argue Ferrari's up there as well, but I think
they're backing his talent, and they're backing him probably to come good.
Yeah.
One thing that you can never. Go ahead, sorry.
I just think I'm with you, Ant. I think he needs to put a whole season together. He starts off amazingly and then tails off towards the end. So I think hopefully we see him put a whole year together.
One thing that
just behind car number 3.
There's one thing you never take for granted is how much just putting some confidence in your driver actually sort of does for their mental state. And it's one thing that always sort of rubs me up the wrong way is when they say that they believe in a driver, but they don't actually they're not showing it in terms of the contract that they're placing in front of him. And you can tell that when a driver's in the last, or driver or rider, whatever, is in the last year of their contract, the pressure of performing can hinder them because it's just all that is in their mind. So now giving Lando, what is it, a 5-year extension? What is it, 27?
4 year, I think. 26.
4 years.
It was 2 extra years on the contract, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So now you know that no matter he cannot blame anything on the fact that he's feeling insecure in the team, because they've taken that part of it out for him. So now it's everything performance related is between him and his mind and the car, but in terms of worrying, being anxious to perform for his contract, that variable's being taken away. So on McLaren's part, that's really good. And hopefully, he does what you said, puts together a good season, because he's definitely got the talent, in parts to sort of show us what he's capable of. Hopefully, he just pits when it starts raining. That's all he needs to do.
He was on a morning show in the UK, and they asked him, what could you have done better over the last 3 years? And he said, I think I've done pretty good. And then the host said, pit for wet tires, and his face was just like, wasn't my fault. And it's like, he's still going down that line. But listening to the two boys talk actually at the launch, it was interesting. Daniel seems quite confident with this car in the sim, the way it's handling, the way it's behaving. Lando doesn't seem as confident with the way it's driving. So he's driven one type of Formula One car. It'll be interesting to see how quickly he picks that up this year, and if he does struggle to adapt.
They were talking about that sometime last year, or they're saying, I can't remember where I read it. It might have been on motorsport.com, but they were saying that for the drivers that are a bit older and long in the tooth, that you would think are on their way out, Vettel, Alonso, or just a couple of names that they brought up. Even Ricardo at this stage is probably one of the more veteran drivers. They were saying that their ability to drive the older cars and their just ability to go from one formula essentially to a new formula within the series will give them a little bit of an initial advantage, where some of these newer drivers might struggle with that. So I'll be interested to see if that quantifies itself early on in the season, and then for those newer drivers that haven't experienced those changes in regulations and have kind of just driven one formula, particularly a formula that has increased in performance, not decreased, it might be interesting to see how long that assimilation takes.
I think I read this morning, George Russell too, he's been saying the Merc needs huge improvements to how it's behaving in the sim. And it's like, is that because he doesn't know how to handle this car? Or like, obviously we're not going to hear from Lewis, but the younger drivers seem to be struggling a little bit in the sims.
It might also be that, I mean, at this stage, everybody's doing their sim work, and they all think that, because they're only basing it off of what they've driven previously, right? So they might all think that they're struggling based on their previous cars. But if everybody is struggling in isolation, when we get to testing and racing, they still all might be. They just might be harder to drive. That's the reality of it. They might be harder to drive. I was listening to something last week, and they were saying that with all the energy or with all the performance coming from underneath the car, and more mechanical grip as opposed to downforce from the top of the car, they were saying that it might even feel, I think it might have been Vettel that was saying that they feel a little bit more like a go-kart, and they're moving around a lot more, and they can snap a lot easier, and there might be a more nuance to the driving that's required, and we might see some of the more technical and gifted drivers be able to distance themselves from either mid-pack, if that makes sense.
Mazepin's going to be spun around the whole season by the sounds of it.
Dude, imagine if Mazepin
he might be a
actually
phenomenal
performs
karter.
good, because it could be more of a GP2 feeling car. Who knows? I mean, there's definitely like more weight involved in the car as well. So that could be another reason why they're saying it feels different, because it's a heavier car by quite substantially, is it not? I mean, I wouldn't take anything that they're saying about how it feels in the sim as as really anything of importance until we see some testing times.
I think everybody is going to feel a drop.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a matter of who can manage the drop in performance better.
I mean, I see one thing that's actually it probably is really important is that no matter how the car handles in the first couple races, your aim should just be to finish the race, because you would expect there to be quite a few teething problems and hiccups in the first couple races. I mean, I think, was it the first race of the turbo hybrid era, Magnussen got a podium with the McLaren, and that was like the best part of their season.
The whole era.
Yeah.
So,
I guess they had new engine regs as well,
and that was still with the Mercedes.
Yeah. So
that was the year before they got to Honda. The year they started with Honda, Button didn't even get to the grid.
One interesting thing that you were saying as well, Harry, about Lando, is that he is only driven for one team, and probably the car's only increased incrementally over his time there, because it's always been an evolution.
Yep.
So it'd be interesting to see if, as Ant's saying, the drivers who've driven different generations of Formula One car, but also in different teams, probably have the what's it called, like the muscle memory of transitioning between different styles. Like you'd maybe imagine someone like Carlos Sainz, who has been through that many different cars in the last couple of years, maybe might even adapt quick as well, because he's had to just do it so many times so quickly. So that definitely be something interesting to look out for.
Carlos and Danny.
Danny. It's gonna be definitely a very interesting start to the year. When is testing starting, by the way?
I just had it here. It's end of this month. I think the 23rd.
28th or something. I'm not sure.
Testing. Testing. There's two tests. There's the one in Spain first, in Barcelona.
Yeah.
And then you've got
February, end of
Bahrain. Yeah. So first, 23rd to the 25th in Spain, and then 10th to the 12th in Bahrain.
It's going to be good. By the time we speak again, we'll have all the liveries out, so we can rate the rest of them, and hopefully we'll have a bit more news as well.
We might also have another short video to post on the socials, because we're trying to tee up a bit of a go-karting challenge in the next fortnight amongst the boys and maybe some esteemed guests as well, just to increase the numbers. And if we can get enough GoPros and enough helmet mounts, we might have half a chance to create a little feature film for the socials. So that's.
I'm ready to go, boys. I'm ready to go.
Did you get a GoPro as well, H?
Oh, I had one, yeah, but I got it out the other day.
Maybe you should just put the mount on the most experienced driver and let him start at the back and just blitz through the field.
I'll yeet into you, mate. I won't let you pass. I won't let you pass.
I think that's probably a good place to end the pod tonight, boys. Some good conversation. A few more liveries coming out this week, and then hopefully by the time we have our next pod, probably within the next fortnight, just so there's some content to talk about. We'll have a few things to be able to throw out. So, gents, thanks for your time again tonight. And again, thanks for everyone for listening. Please keep sharing the pod with people that you think might be interested with it. Keep following us on socials, like, subscribe, do all those things that everybody asks you to do. And most importantly, thanks for your time. Guys, have a great night. Cheers.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers, buddy.